Okay, the Housing Development and Zoning Committee will be called to order for November 16th, 2021. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Cone. Alderman Coder.
Ensuring that people don't have
Alderwoman Boyd.
a way to
Here.
move forward.
Alderman Muhammad. Alderwoman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Evans. Chairman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Coder.
Here.
Thank you. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Evans. 5 present, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll entertain a motion on approval of the minutes for November the 9th, 2021.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
The movement second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Coder.
It looks like his lips were saying aye, but we couldn't hear any audio for Coder.
I'm sorry, Alderman Coder, we didn't catch that. Alderwoman, thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad. Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderwoman Evans. Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
6 aye votes.
Okay, I want to remind the committee members that when we're taking votes, you should show your video. Whenever we're taking votes, you should show your video. Okay, we're gonna suspend with item 4 and 5. We're gonna go to committee discussions today. We'll be talking about the American Recovery Act plan. There's been a lot. I know I've gotten a lot of questions from my constituents specific to one item, which is the $500. That's what they keep asking me about, which I have nothing to tell them about that. But I'm also curious as to where we are with all the other fundings as well as other colleagues. So I'm really excited and happy we could put this meeting together. It took a couple of weeks juggling people's schedules, but appreciate Noel gathering his team together and making this work today. So without further ado, Noel, I will hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Boyd. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting our office to provide an implementation update regarding Arpa Funds to the HUD committee. I'm going to share my screen at this point so that we can walk through a presentation, and I'll pass it over to our Chief of Staff, Jared Boyd, to provide an overview of the presentation and kick things off. Jared?
Okay.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Jared Boyd, Chief of Staff in the Mayor's Office. I'm going to provide a brief overview of where we stand with the American Rescue Plan Act implementation that was ratified through Board Bill 2. After doing so, I will yield the floor to Dr. Matisse Lechois-Davis, our new Health Director, who will provide a brief update on our COVID response. After such time, we'll go through the Department of Health expenditures, after which time we will go through the Department of Human Services expenditures in conjunction with Yusef Scoggins, our new Department of Human Services Director, and we'll also bring in Treasurer Adam Lane in conjunction with Mr. Scoggins to talk about direct cash assistance. Noel Pfeffer in our office. We'll talk about the development agencies, and then I will close with some of the administrative expenditures. So without further ado, just want to remind the committee about the timeline for ARPA and Board Bill 2. ARPA was signed into law by the President in March of 2021 with very specific purposes, the very specific purpose of helping America recover from the twin issues of COVID and the economy having to shut down. So in June, we received the money, and in between such time, the mayor's office convened a stimulus advisory board to provide assistance and community input in formulating a direct relief package. Prior to Board Bill 2 going into effect, a small portion of the ARPA funds were used as revenue replacement dollars. And then finally, in August of 2021, $122 million of the state, local, and recovery funds were passed by the board and signed into law, and another approximately $12 million in rental and utility assistance funds were also signed into law. So just a broad overview. These are the broad categories of expenditures that were ratified in Board Bill 2, Ordinance 71393. Approximately $5 million for COVID response, housing relief, and other housing assistance, about $40 million. Re-envisioning public safety about $11 million. Economic relief and direct cash assistance, approximately $28 million. Housing production and preservation, approximately $35 million. Planning administrative costs, approximately $4 million, and things that fall into the other category, about $20 million. So as you all know, these are highly regulated funds, and they are required to be spent within Treasury guidelines. So, you know, before passing the bill and as we implement, we work with a number of professionals to make sure that all the expenditures are within the framework of the Treasury guidelines, so that we don't have to yield any of the money back to the federal government. We sent along some of the literature on the guidance for the expenditure of these monies. So with that, most of these expenditures are spent after competitive procurement process. In the city of St. Louis, we also have our professional services ordinance. So as we go through some of the line items, you'll notice the theme of these expenditures going through the RFP process before dollars are spent. There are also reporting requirements that go with these funds, and we have submitted a report to the federal government that was submitted at the end of August that we sent to the committee on our expenditures and kind of the rationale behind each of the expenditures. And we know that these funds will be audited, so we are working with auditors on the front end to ensure that we are ready when such time comes to pass. So with that, I will go through some of the Department of Health expenditures to provide an update on where those stand. And I believe you all have a spreadsheet that will help kind of lead this conversation. So the first line item is for $500,000, and that's for canvassing community outreach. And we've listed some of the KPIs that we are looking for with that expenditure. Increased vaccination rates, increased health service usage, So we submitted an RFP or issued an RFP beginning of October with a closing date of late October, 10/25/21. And we've received RFP responses that are being reviewed by the PASA committee and expect at least one contract to be ratified as a result of that. It's also important to note that prior to this RFP being issued, we located some community block grant dollars to start the community canvassing process. With respect to the second line item, community health workers, this line item, and Dr. Mahdi might refer to this in her overview to COVID. We hired a number of individuals to supplement the health department that were paid for by the CARES Act, and this appropriation has allowed us to retain some of that increased capacity, and I'll allow Dr. Mahdi to discuss that if need be further. Behavioral health providers, $5 million. This is to increase utilization of mental health services, decrease officer-involved violent incidents, and really kind of build upon some of the progress that we've had with cops and clinicians and diversionary services. Additionally, we're looking to deploy some of these resources for counseling services in other places. But it's important to note that there's an existing contract for cops and clinicians through June 2022. However, the back end of that contract is actually unfunded, so some of these funds will pay for the existing contract between, I believe, February and June, and we are also putting out an RFP, I believe, in December for another tranche of these funds that will support both expansion in current operations for cops and clinicians and 911 diversionary services. Community violence intervention programs, that's another $5.5 million. Many of you are familiar with Cure Violence, and we recently submitted data to the board on just an update on Cure Violence and some of the statistics from the current sites, 3 sites. And although we've received some data, we're going to be subsequently getting a much deeper dive into the efficacy of the current Cure Violence sites with an eye on expansion based upon such data. And the next item, youth-led programming, $1 million. These are programs that increase awareness for youth about both kind of COVID-19 vaccination opportunities and also with an eye of reducing crime through positive activities. We have submitted an appropriation to the St. Louis Mental Health Board to begin making grants. But it's also important to note that we've piloted 4 youth-led events, some in downtown, some in Forest Park, and we've had about 400 youth that have attended these events that provide positive activities for youth, typically on a Saturday evening. Mobile vaccination clinics, $1 million has been appropriated for that line item. Although we've spent about $42,000, it's important to note that this is another place where we've had to use funds to fulfill existing contracts. So Affinia Health is providing a lot of the services that are included to the tune of about $500,000 that's already going to kind of be used to commit to an existing contract. Vaccination, education, and marketing, that's $500,000. There is an interdepartmental agreement with STL TV for $300,000 of that $500,000. that is in process. And last but not least, the COVID-19 vaccination incentive program. 1.25 million was appropriated, and we have spent 720,000 of that so far, and we have purchased about 7,000 gift cards and used about 1,000 of those gift cards. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mati to provide some context too as to the COVID, our response to COVID with respect to those line items, or in addition to those line items. Dr. Mati Davis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boyd. Honorable Alderman Boyd and members of this esteemed committee, thank you so much for having me here today to talk a little bit about my overall plan for COVID for the city. As many of you may or may not be aware, I began my tenure as the new Director of Health on October 18th and had to focus immediately on our pediatric vaccination program, given the then pending, but very quickly recommendation of the ability to safely and effectively vaccinate children from the ages of 5 to 11. I'm very proud of what we were able to pull together in a very short period of time, because what we've been able to do is to pull together a community-driven program that engages schools, hospitals, and centers, our federally qualified healthcare centers and community partners, and more to reach communities in an equitable way. What we want to do is to reach children where they are already comfortable. And so we're using this as an opportunity to remind their parents about the importance of being protected against COVID-19 as well. And we know that those spaces are the FQHCs and community partners that have already earned the trust, since for many of these communities, and I say very specifically Black and Brown communities, mistrust is a continuing issue, understandably so, given the historic and current issues that have had them lose trust in both government and healthcare institutions. So that part of it was very important to me to center on as a result. Past that, we have also centered as part of our approach here, education in making sure that we make accessible education towards the general community and specifically parents and those who are in the care of children to make the best decision for them and their families. The Department of Health has been working nonstop for the past year through the biggest health crisis of our generation. And I think we can all agree, prior to me starting in this position, as someone who was on the outside, just watching their hard work and dedication is so much appreciated. And we are working to staff up and increase our capacity to be able to uphold all the programs that will be necessary for both the adult and pediatric vaccine programs, while making sure St. Louis families have access to life-saving vaccines, testing, and other critical resources. With that rollout being the Department of Health's primary focus in the past 2 weeks, the Department of Health would like to we'd like to make sure that those processes are in place, and then understand that I'm not at the luxury to only focus on COVID and the pediatric strategy, but make sure that we're also paying attention to all of the health-related non-COVID related conditions that still impact our communities. I will stop now, and if it's okay with Noel in the mayor's office, we'll ask if anyone has specific questions for me at this time, because I will need to leave to participate in the Board of Public Service meeting at 1:45.
Yes, that would be great.
Happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
We're going to save our questions and comments for last, but thank you so much and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you so much.
With that, Chairman Boyd,
I'm sure Noel can back you up if we have any questions.
Yeah,
He's the
I do
policy
think-
advisor, so he knows everything. We always look for him when we don't know the answer.
I would definitely back him up and say him and this office have been invaluable in bringing this rookie up to speed.
I am
But I will
quite sure.
also say that, please, can you reach out to me directly? I'm very responsive to email and happy to provide telephone details as well for anyone who has any other follow-up questions.
Awesome.
I also appreciate that confidence, Chairman Boyd, but really would encourage the committee to take the opportunity to dialogue with Director Mahdi directly, as she will not be around at the end of the hearing to take any questions.
Sorry, Chairman, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was saying thank you, Mr. Noel. Let me find my cheat sheet and I will do just that. I'll go around real quick and see if anybody have any questions. Let's see here. I'm doing double duty here. It's a shame that Zoom makes you be in two places at one time. Omnipresent, right? Okay, let's see here. Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you,
Questions?
Mr. Chairman. I have no questions, but congratulations to Dr. Davis and her new appointment here. So far, you've been extremely accessible to the public, and so they like meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alderwoman Davis. It means so much to hear that from you. My background is in community engagement, and if you're going to engage, right?
Yeah.
And you need to meet people where they are through many different mediums. Today I was visiting one of the cornerstones for HIV within the community. Our fearless leader, Erise Williams and Williams and Associates, and just going out, meeting people, being accessible is something that I'll continue to try to do. Please hold me accountable. And if there are ways that I can be doing that in your wards, please reach out to me directly so that we can make that happen. But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Cone. Is Alderman Cone there?
I am here. I'm getting feedback though.
Okay.
Is someone not on mute?
No, that's sorry. That's me. I apologize. I'm doing public safety and HUDs at the same time. So, are you there? Is that better? You're on mute. Alderman Cone, you're on mute.
Hi, yeah.
Is that better?
I don't have any, it's not, but I don't have any particular questions, but thank you, Dr. Mahdi, as well for your accessibility. I know you and I have been communicating recently with efforts in getting young people in Dutchtown vaccinated, so appreciate your effort and that of your team. This is a pretty solid plan I think we have to try and combat COVID in the city of St. Louis, and so I know that you're new to role and getting your feet wet with everyone else and learning the city and the department and all of the different functions there. So just really appreciate your accessibility and openness as we work through, getting our communities the answers that they need. So thank you again.
Wow, Chairman Boyd, I'm going to ask to be invited every time I'm having a bad day. This is the friendliest committee I've ever been to, but I want to thank Alderman Cone for that. And I want to uplift him as an example of how this partnership works. He reached out to me on a Tuesday of last week and said, my ward would like to, through the partnership with our Boys and Girls Club, make vaccines accessible for children. Because of this partnership and this unique way that we've put aside our individual silos and egos and have us come together in this collaboration, I was able to convene a meeting with our partners within 24 hours. And within 72 hours, that had not only been done, but we had extended it to 3 different locations within his ward. That is the power of partnership and community. And I'm really looking forward to being able to do that in other areas as this progresses. So thank you to Alderman Cone and his leadership.
Awesome. Alderman Pam Boyd.
I don't have anything. Her and I have already talked. I'm excited. She hit the ground with roller skates on. So I'm excited about her bubbly attitude, her positivity that she has. And so I look forward to great things coming from the health department. So
not roller skates, Alderwoman Boyd. And thank you for not saying rollerblades, because I'm an 80s baby and they didn't have them when I was coming up. But I appreciate you and wanted to say that I really appreciate Alderwoman Boyd because she reached out to me a month before I even started and was part of my listening tour before I started the job, really uplifted the work of not only her district, but her area of expertise. And we were able to put things on the calendar and we'll be meeting actually soon to follow up. And I appreciate not only the accountability, but the collaborative spirit with which she does that with my office. So like I said, I'm coming back to this committee. You're not gonna be able to stop me.
Is that with Alderwoman Boyd? Okay, is Alderman Muhammad with us? How about Alderwoman Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo my colleagues. I really appreciate the energy and effort, and I also appreciate this hearing. It's just to hear information. That is it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Orion, I know he's in public safety. Are you listening, Alderman Orion? Are you with us? Okay, we'll go to Alderwoman Evans. Has she joined us yet?
Yes, I have, and I just want to congratulate you on your new position, and I look forward to meeting you.
Okay.
Me too. Thank you.
I've heard nothing but accolades and good words about you, and I certainly look forward to meeting you in person. It seems that you're on the right track and you're excited. I love that enthusiasm. We all are on the same team, and I love it when we're all working together.
Thank you, Alderman Boyd. And I think our priorities are all the same: equity, equity, equity at the center of all we do here, and look forward to the accountability and the partnerships.
Yeah,
I will stay
I just
on
have one question. I know you have to leave.
Oh, thank you.
One quick question. You can
Yes,
put yourself.
please. Thank you.
We were having a discussion in public safety about the Reverend Rice Center, was the New Evangelist Life Center downtown. Are you working with them? They said they did, for some reason, they said they didn't know anything about the RFP, which I found was kind of odd. But they did say they had conversation with the mayor's office about how they can participate with the funding. Are you currently working with Mr. Rice over there? His grandson, I forget his first name.
Thank you for that question. Having started only 2 weeks ago, I am not familiar. I'll ask the mayor's office if they've been in communications, and we'll say that we're obviously open to that moving forward as well. So Noel or someone from the mayor's office?
Yeah. Alderman Boyd, that question will be addressed, I think, or can be addressed by Director Scoggins. The RFP for emergency shelter is housed in the Department of Human Services.
Okay, all right, no problem. Thank you. Well, I think we've exhausted our list. Turn it back over to you, Noel. Where are we?
I'll pass it back to Jared, and we're moving on to Human Services.
Okay.
Yes, and I will immediately pass it to Director Scoggins to go through the human services line items and provide an update as to where they stand.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the work that is taking place here in the Department of Human Services, as well as how the resources that you've allocated are going to help to really move the needle in the work that we need to do to support the human service needs, social determinant of health related matters for our population here in St. Louis. So I'll start out talking about sort of the broad picture of human services. Certainly the unhoused is a central element of what we do here within the Human Services Department. As you are aware, there are rental assistance dollars which are focused in a way that really has not been funded in the past in a significant way, and that is to prevent folks from losing their housing. This is a key element to the equation around unhoused individuals and housing instability, so that you can stop the pipeline of individuals into homeless services. Shelter is but a temporary stay. It is not the desired outcome. but it is a necessary component of the services. So in this discussion, I will go through the wide array of services that are available and will be available to fund the sort of resources that are necessary to both secure us in the short term and in the years to come. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program first came under the bill that was passed back in December of 2020. And that fund allowed for the appropriation of $46 billion across the country of emergency rental assistance dollars. The state of Missouri received north of $408 million. And there were 8 communities within the state of Missouri that had more than 200,000 people as a population who could directly administer those resources. St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and about 5 other communities chose to opt in. The only exception being St. Charles. They decided to allow their resources to be administered at the state level. The state also is administering a similar program. It is called something different. It is termed as the SAFER program. And so locally, we here in the city of St. Louis administer the resources. And I probably should have introduced that I also am a new director here in the department. I've been on the job for, I believe today is my 18th day. And so many of these operations are part and parcel subject to the diligent work of the staff here in the Department of Human Services that really thought through a lot of this and worked with the board to ensure that certain funds were also being made available for future endeavors. So with that being said, our current emergency rental assistance program was awarded nearly $9 million, 10% of which could be utilized for administration and case management. And that resource was deployed in a very similar way as housing stabilization dollars were under the CARES Act. It was awarded to 7 different nonprofits in the community, all of which were awarded $1 million or more to support the rental assistance and utility assistance needs of households who had been impacted by the pandemic. Did not mean that they had to be directly infected by the virus, but it could have meant that they lost resources in some way, form, or fashion, or had increased expenses subject to the pandemic. And so to date, those resources are being deployed. Currently, a little north of $6 million has been spent down, so over 75% of the direct assistance dollars have been deployed to date, which with approximately 1,400 households having been assisted. What we do know is that our community is in significant need, and these resources will need to continue into the future. Luckily, the federal government was of the same mind, and under the Biden administration passed a second round of this funding. And the city of St. Louis has been awarded $12.44 million. What we wanted to make sure is that we weren't just administering programs, but we wanted to be very thoughtful about how these resources were reaching community and really getting feedback and really understanding the data as it relates to the operations of such programs. And so to that end, we've been able to look at programs across the country as well as locally to determine which programs have operated most effectively. When I say most effectively, making sure that not just equitable lens is utilized, which the city of St. Louis has utilized under the first round of funding, not just integrates with the court system, but also make sure that the turnaround time for the deployment of resources after application has been submitted and completed are done in ways that provide quick turnaround, as well as support households who have a variety of needs. And so to that end, many, I think, would recognize here in the region, we often are having to duplicate our conversation around rental assistance in the county or in the city or in the state or in St. Charles. And so what we entered into was a conversation with the St. Louis County to discuss putting forth a joint RFP. That joint RFP was issued in October, and it looks for a single administrator that will provide a single portal so that those in the community are able to access and apply for the resources in one place, whether you're a city or a county resident, and only based upon your actual address will the dollars draw from the community from which you live. That will help us to communicate better, I think, across the region for those who are most in need, help us really execute on reaching those who are most in need, provide real-time data around what is happening within our community, where are the resources being sought, as well as where they're being deployed, ensuring that we have the community partnerships that execute not on just printing checks and sending those out to various landlords, but really supporting those households that have really unique circumstances. And I'll talk a little bit about that as to how these ARPA funds will integrate with similar operations. Ultimately, we want to be strategic about what happens here and make sure that we can avoid eviction or displacement of households. Next slide. Next slide. And so we kind of get into the ARPA funds, which are a great, great opportunity for our community to really build upon what we've learned under the CARES Act, what we've realized subject to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. But I think also most importantly, the folks who are impacted now, most of which were already experiencing disproportionate impacts prior to the pandemic. And our recognition of that from a health perspective, from an economic standpoint, et cetera, all inform why these programs are important. And so we are very thankful that the board saw to it, as well as the mayor's office, most importantly, to put forth these resources in a way that really we're thinking about remedying and addressing some of the challenges that we have long faced here in our city. And so one of the key elements centers around mortgage assistance. There is a mortgage assistance that is planned at the state level, but it is yet to be deployed. And mortgage assistance here locally is extraordinarily important. I know many on the board, as well as in our community, are certainly aware of the wealth gap between African-American households and Caucasian households in our region. There's nearly a 30% or more home ownership gap between that. How do we mitigate disproportionate impacts during times of hardship that impact communities of color if we don't have a mortgage assistance program in place? And so this mortgage assistance program will help us to address some of those challenges. And so we will be deploying those resources to the tune of approximately $2.5 million. What I want to say about all of these things that I'm actually noting today, an RFP was issued in mid-October, and those RFPs have been received and will be in part reviewed over the next several weeks. One tranche of the proposals, approximately half, a little bit north of half of the proposals, will be reviewed later this week by the PSA. And so we will be making decisions around what is best in terms of coordination of these resources and what proposals would really help us to impact in the way that could really change the dynamics within our city. There's been much conversation about safe outdoor spaces and the ability for individuals in a controlled environment be able to be safe and also be case managed with the proper supports. And so $1.25 million will be used for that purpose. The mayor's office, as well as Congresswoman Bush, have been to places such as Denver to investigate similar programs. So there are really examples of success for such operations. And so we look forward to what proposals have been submitted subject to this opportunity. Oftentimes, and I know Chairman Boyd, Vice Chair Boyd, in the previous public safety call, there was some discussion about low barrier options for sheltering, et cetera. And so this next line item, bullet point number 3, safe havens, are a key element to cover that subject matter. We know that there are many who struggle with substance abuse issues and another number of other challenges, which may not always be amenable to congregate sheltering in the way that is currently provided. And so to the degree that we're able to provide similar operations as what was stood up last year by some community activists, I think that will be key to ensuring that we have options for all involved. Emergency shelter. So we have, subject to the pandemic, a need to social distance. And so what that led to in the beginning of the pandemic is a reduction in the number of beds that were available at any individual shelter. Through FEMA dollars and other resources, additional spaces were able to be brought online, which actually have allowed for us to have more shelter beds available currently than was the case prior to the pandemic. We need to maintain those beds, as well as we need to provide additional beds. And so under emergency shelter, that will be a key component of that line item. And that's to make sure that we have adequate number of sheltering spots for individuals under COVID recommendations that also provide a temporary stay so we can transition folks ultimately to the most important location, and that is permanent housing. When we're thinking about provision of all of these subjects and all of these services that I'm discussing today, none of it can happen without some way of coordinating and connecting folks to these resources. So the call, hotline, and centralized intake is paramount to this work. We have to be coordinated in our efforts to ensure that no wrong door is the option for folks, as well as to ensure that we are not duplicating effort. And so coordination will occur through that hotline and centralized intake. Wraparound services to connect people in a variety of ways are key. And so that might include transportation options, other services to connect folks to the key resources that might be incidentally necessary, but very important as we get through this winter months, as we make sure that resources are available throughout the city. There, in spite of the rental assistance dollars that are being provided under the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, there are still circumstances in which some individuals may be displaced. And sometimes that's subject to landlord and the tenant not agreeing or deciding to terminate the lease and move forward. Sometimes there are situations in which residents' property is not inhabitable, all of which can lead to temporary displacement. And so bridge housing to provide that sort of necessary stay that is short-term, in which there are already outlined concrete housing options for which folks to transfer, is the purpose of the $1.5 million of bridge housing. Rapid Rehousing is a program that was actually established under the Obama administration back in 2009 under what was called at the time the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program. It is intended to provide a window of time of support for households. It can range anywhere from 6 to 12 months to provide housing supports, rental assistance, utility assistance, and most importantly, case management until a person is able to get on their feet and support themselves. We will be working with Slate and a number of other providers to ensure that there's really close connectivity to these households so as to make sure that they're stable and sustainable moving forward. And so that's what the $3 million of rapid rehousing is for. So those who have been displaced and are in need of being housed again in a rapid fashion. Permanent supportive housing at $1.5 million is for those who might need more long-term supports. Those are also individuals who often have disabilities and could be within the space of what we call chronically unhoused. And so permanent supportive housing are often co-occurring issues within that particular household, in which ongoing case management may be necessary to support that household to sufficiency. Next slide. There is the real estate and property tax relief program that will be released. There's a number of clarifications on that are still being discussed relative to ensuring that folks don't lose their homes just to tax sales, et cetera. And so there are a number of folks, again, who have experienced financial hardship during this time, who could truly suffer from the most stable place to be, and that is one home that they may own, subject to things that we could relieve through this program. As Jared mentioned earlier, accountability is not just for the organizations who may ultimately operate some of these programs, but most importantly, the administration here in the Department of Human Services. And as Dr. Mahdi mentioned earlier, staffing capacity is really stretched. And so it is extremely important that we have the staffing that is necessary to support. And obviously, this is one of the smallest line items, very small line item. There are really some valiant efforts having been taking place here in this office over the period of this pandemic. And this support is extraordinarily important to ensure that the city does not have to pay back any resources, and that the coordination of these programs and operations are effectively deployed. As I mentioned before, case management is a key component and program operations. So I put here in parentheses ERA or ERAP, Emergency Rental Assistance, the second deployment. We wanted to make sure that as many of those emergency rental assistance dollars are being deployed to the households. Again, only $12.44 million has been provided for us to directly administer. The average assistance of households that have received rent or rental assistance has been nearly $4,000. And we know that based upon the number of applications, that $12 million will likely be exhausted in short order. And so we want to make sure that every dollar we can goes in that direction. And so the case management, however, to really support those households will be provided through this complementary line item. These next two items, which are direct support for care workers as well as the senior services, are really to ensure that our seniors are supported. As we know, the greatest number of deaths were for seniors during this pandemic. And they've experienced all sorts of hardship, social isolation being another one. And so what we want to do is make sure that seniors are supported in a way that allows them to live independently for as long as possible, and that the support workers that are associated are able to help navigate them through this process. And so this really kind of outlines the full array of services that we are making available through ARPA funds, as well as through the emergency rental assistance funds through the Treasury. These complementing one another, deployed in a proper way with the proper oversight, will, I believe, make significant dents in our housing unstable and our homeless population over the short run, especially over the next several years. We do not expect that all of these resources will be spent in a year. This will be a several-year element. And so this will also help shore up some of our efforts, not just in this winter, but also for next year winter. So we can plan well ahead to ensure that efforts are operating in a way that most impactful. The last line item around the targeted cash assistance, as Vice Chair Boyd mentioned, is a hot topic of his
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm actually Chairman Boyd on this committee, but I'm Vice Chair on Public Safety. So just so that you know, I'm actually Chairman of the committee.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Chairman Boyd mentioned that this was a significant reason why he was receiving calls by his citizens, and I'm sure other persons are feeling the same. We get many, many calls here in our office as well. We are coordinating our efforts with the Treasury Department, as well as Office of the Treasury, as well as United Way. And for more details on that, I will pass it over to Treasurer Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Scoggin. Thank you, Chairman Boyd and members of this committee for having me here. I always like to start with gratitude. So before I get into the details, I just want to thank one, the mayor for putting this forward, and then also the alderman for passing this, because this is very important. This is something that we believe is going to make a difference for families and households in St. Louis. I also want to thank you, Director Scoggin, for answering the call and joining, but I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank Valerie Russell, who has been key in making sure that we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted in this process, as well as the City Councilor's office as we move forward in an equitable and right manner. So right now we are, I would say, in the closing stages of working with DHS and our vendors who we've approved through our RFP process, the United Way and Mocify, to begin getting this out. So the $5 million, which will be broken up into $500 payments, is to help families who have experienced any negative economic impact due to COVID, which is a lot. So of this $5 million, with those $500 payments, we're estimating north of 9,000 households that this will serve. And we want to make sure, again, this is a smooth process. So we've been working, I feel like my team, the United Way team, DHS has been working around the clock. We have, and the communications teams as well. When we're not meeting on Zoom, we are emailing. When we're not emailing, we're having phone conversations just to make sure this goes smoothly. Other cities in our research that we found have implemented similar programs. So like St. Paul, Chicago, and also Memphis. And we were able to get on the phone with Cook County, which implemented would say the most similar program to this in the most recent times, just to be able to answer questions about what worked, what didn't work, what they wish they would have done differently, so that we don't fall into those same pitfalls as we move this forward here in St. Louis. So like I said, we have the United Way and Mocify who are going to be our partners. The United Way is going to be opening up the application portal, going through applications, and then also approving those applications. So they have a staff and team that is going to be doing that. And then Mocify will be our financial partner to be able to give out the $500 cards that will be PIN protected to make sure that no one can take someone else's money that was designated for them. So again, I express a lot of gratitude in terms of the people who have been working diligently, seemingly day and night on this to get this out to citizens. Of course, we want to go through the right processes. So with the RFP process, that is a process to get a city hall committee together, or a city committee together to create an RFP, send out an RFP, and then review the responses. And that has to be open for a window of time. I'm glad that we've passed that time, but we are working with all deliberate speed to make sure that this is something that gets out into the community. And we have plenty of data and metrics that we are also working on the front end to make sure we capture, to be able to report out on the effectiveness of this program. So in the future, let's say, hopefully and prayerfully, that there are more dollars in the future available for something like this. We know that we have a solid program and solid machine that's well oiled and operated to be able to continue to deliver this if more funds become available for it in the future. And I know, Chairman Board, you said you had some questions, and I'm happy to answer those and any questions from any of the members. But I will just check with Mr. Scoggin to see if there are any other slides that you had to get to before questions.
I'm going to save questions for last. I got questions in because the director had to leave. So, but I'd rather save questions for the end. I'm taking notes, and I'm guessing my other committee members are taking notes as well.
Understood.
Yeah, Chairman Boyd, I was supposed to be in the same meeting. I'll blame it on the committee.
Hey, I'll take the heat for you, no problem. Send them my way.
And we are in the same boat as Director Scott just mentioned, where he does need to get to another meeting. So once again, I'd actually encourage folks to ask questions, at least of Director Scoggin now.
Okay. You open it up then. Let's see here. Alderman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Director Scoggins, welcome. We have a very talented director that has a lot of experience. I'm wishing you well. I know that you have not only the heart and compassion to do the job, but I know that you're extremely researched and developed on these topics that have grave concern for our city. I'm not going to ask any questions right now because I still think that there's more for us to learn. And a lot of these categories require additional information. And I'm sure that we will see that as you make decisions with the outcomes of the RFP process. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Someone need to answer their phone. Can you see me?
We can see you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Director. I just want to, I guess, I have a lot of questions, some of which, to my colleague from the 19th Ward's point, I know we're waiting for answers, but one question in particular that comes up fairly frequently for mom and pop, family-owned properties that might be multifamily, the rental assistance, like they've had people who obviously have lost jobs that, they're living above them, they're renting from below or vice versa. And, they've been told that folks have gotten rental assistance or, are going to be participating in that, but the money doesn't go directly to the landlord. It goes supposedly directly to the tenant. And so I'd like some clarification on just the process around the rental assistance program and how that is supposed to be working. Just so I can constituents on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Alderman Cone. So the emergency rental assistance program is actually designed to do both. Primarily, it is looking to address the utility and rental assistance needs of the household. So standardly, what happens is a tenant or the landlord will apply for the assistance and payment subject to the meeting of the qualifications. Payment is made to the landlord. That's standardly what happens. It is only the case if certain circumstances are met in which the payment would go directly to the tenant. But it is the primary focus that almost 99% of payments are going directly to the landlord for which the payment is due.
Thank you. That is incredibly helpful because I don't think that message is necessarily out there in the public domain. And, it's one of the pieces of this particular piece of legislation that, I get into probably the most contentious arguments over. Obviously, we all want to keep people in their homes and we want to keep people safe, but we don't want other people losing their homes as a result of that either. And particularly down in my neck of the woods, I do have a lot of 2- and 4-family apartment buildings that are owner occupied as well. And so, there are people who are quote unquote landlords, but it's their house that they're living in that they're renting out as well. And so that becomes a bit of a conversation starter for folks. So I do appreciate the clarification and some of the numbers associated with that you gave me so I can educate my constituents on it. Thank you. Otherwise, I'll, oh, sorry.
Yeah, Alderman Code. I think that's one of the challenges that I was trying to hint at early on. Our sort of administration of these resources in the way that it happens at the state versus here locally, both in the city versus in the county. The nomenclature, so the program at the state being called SAFER, locally is called ERAP. That all of which made it, I think, very difficult for landlords to understand exactly what they were applying for and which program they were speaking of. And so that is part of the reason why we were looking to do what was set out in the RFP around the second round of emergency rental assistance in conjunction with St. Louis County, is so that we can clarify some of these things and we don't have to spend so much time re-explaining what should be very clearly spoken through one voice.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I don't have any questions. I just need to read thoroughly through it, and congratulations, Mr. Scoggins. But I have questions, but I just think I need to read through so I can write things down so I can be ready to ask the questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Martin.
Hey, what's going on? My internet today, it's slow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Scoggins, thank you so much. My question was covered by what Alderman Cone asked. It's asked very often. I have lots of kind of small time landlords, and even some of the bigger landlords have been in touch about this. So I appreciate your time and information. Thank you.
Okay, next, Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman Boyd. I only caught the tail end of this since I was still hung up in the Public Safety Committee. So I'm just listening now and hoping to learn some more. Thank you.
Okay, next, Alderwoman Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I as well am listening, and I've got to read up on it so that I can ask legitimate questions pertaining to this. And I just appreciate the assistance that is coming to landlords and tenants. And like I said, I'll just have to read up on it and find out exactly and get a better understanding. But thank you.
Okay. Again, congratulations, Mr. Scoggins, on your appointment. I have several questions. Let's go back to the real estate and personal property tax relief. Explain that to me again. Or is that something we're still working on, or I kind of missed something you said about it when you start talking about it? How's that working?
Yeah, so obviously those who are at risk of losing their property subject to delinquent real estate taxes, et cetera, are certainly a challenge for housing stability. And so there were some initial questions about how far back and some clarifications around the use of those funds that was being explored so that the deployment of that resource could be done in a way that was in alignment with the regulations. So hopefully that explains your question.
So you're still waiting on some guidance from the Treasury's office?
Correct. So that we're working, not Noel, was he about to speak?
Yes, I can also jump in on this. So the big question on this front is essentially, can we use ARPA funds to offset tax revenue? Because there's a provision in the bill that says that states and territories cannot. However, we have received legal counsel and clarification that ARPA funds can be used to offset property taxes so long as it is responding to a negative economic impact of the pandemic. That's why we're narrowing this instead of just carte blanche property tax relief to property tax relief for folks who are at risk of foreclosure as a result of the pandemic and are behind 3 or 4 years worth of property taxes. So there was some legal uncertainty that slowed things down, but we are moving forward now.
So let me make sure I'm clear on what you said. You're narrowing it down to people who are at risk of foreclosure, which means they're basically 4 years behind on their taxes.
That's right.
But some people who have suffered financial hardship due to the pandemic and who can't afford to pay the $1,900 of 2020 taxes or even 2019 taxes, they would not be eligible.
It's a very limited pool of funds, so we're having conversations around how best to prioritize them. But that need to connect it to a negative economic impact from the pandemic is really important to us in terms of designing a tight, narrow program, especially given the limited amount of funds.
Right, but I think some people might argue, and I'm supportive of it, but I think some people might argue that, well, if a person was 2 years behind in taxes pre-pandemic, and then is 2 additional years, during the pandemic, which puts them in foreclosure, it is a huge benefit for them compared to somebody who's been working and hit with a job loss due to pandemic and now owes $1,900, now maybe $3,800 over 2 years for taxes, but they couldn't qualify. That seems like, to me, that's a little imbalanced. But I get your point about keeping people in their homes and not losing their homes. But it just seems on the surface there's an imbalance there.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And it's also something that we are trying to determine is whether we can pay off that 2018 or 2017 tax with these ARPA dollars. So that's still an open legal question as well. We know we can pay off the 2020. But still, even among those 2020 tax payments, we want to prioritize those at risk of losing their homes.
True. Got it. So the treasurer mentioned 9,000 households projected to service at $500, right, Treasurer Lane?
I did, yes.
Okay, so that's basically $4.5 million. Do you anticipate the other 500,000 being used for admin?
Oh, not 500,000. So I did round up. So I rounded above the 300,000. I'm sorry, rounded about a little over to 400,000. It's a little upwards of 300,000 for the admin costs. So 9,200 plus households.
Okay, so is that going to United Way and the other organization that will be issuing the cards?
Correct.
Okay, got it. So I got accosted a few months ago, maybe a couple of months ago, near 3 months ago, about a landlord who was going off on me because I'm not doing anything for landlords. So this is not on you, Treasurer Lane. This is, I guess, on Mr. Scoggins, who's still relatively new. And what he was complaining to me about is he had this tenant that owed $9,000 in back rent, and I guess they had such a horrible relationship that she refused to apply for the rental assistance, and so he got left holding the bag. I mean, have you ever heard of that? Or how do we support landlords who get with a tenant who may even be working but decided not to pay and then left and didn't apply for the funds? How do we support that landlord?
Yeah, that's, I think, a key element for why case management is required in some of these circumstances, as well as mediation services. There are certain grievances, long-standing grievances that often exist between landlords and tenants, and the degree to which there can be a mediator to help bridge that divide, that's important. What I would say, one of the challenges is when we're talking about households being eligible for the assistance, meaning the tenant, we do have to at least get some statement of COVID impact. Without any statement of COVID impact from the tenant, the eligible party for assistance in that regard, then it's very difficult to make that payment to the landlord. This is a program, however, generally speaking, barring a tenant not wanting to participate at all. And it happens on the other side too, where landlords don't want to participate at all. Barring those sort of circumstances, this is a resource that benefits both tenant and landlords. It allows most times tenants to remain in their location with the arrears being paid, as well as those landlords being made whole regarding the debt that is owed to them. And so I think the mediation services being more broadly deployed will help to avoid some of these circumstances. But yeah, there are certainly some issues that aren't always addressed, but that's why all of these options are going to be helpful in navigating our way to solutions.
So you bring up a good point. So when we do this blanket moratorium, you have people out there who have not lost their job due to COVID. They just decided that since I can't be evicted, I'm not going to pay. So they go 8, 9, 10 months and don't pay. And if they try to qualify, they won't qualify because they can't substantiate that they've been financially impacted due to COVID. But at the end of the day, you know, the landlord is the one that suffers, you know, and can't do anything about it. And so I will call you, excuse me, and talk to you more about that, because I really would like to try to figure out how we can get relief for landlords who have tenants that are just gaming the system, if you will, and then they get, you know, left holding the bag. And the landlord is responsible for making sure that the roof is fixed, all the repairs, and paying their own mortgage on the property. Last question on this, I'll let you go. So mortgage assistance, is it the same system? If a person wanted to get mortgage assistance, are they going to call the same provider that provides rental assistance for the mortgage assistance?
So these are a separate RFPs. So the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is an RFP that was jointly done with city and county. We look to review those. All those proposals were submitted as of yesterday. And so we're looking to review those and make some decisions in short order. There was a separate RFP for the mortgage assistance and Arpa funds. And so I can't make any sort of statements or judgments about what the results will be subject to that because those proposals haven't been fully reviewed. But certainly our goal would be to ensure that there's coordination of efforts to sort of streamline and make sure that folks are able to access the resources as easily as possible. Okay.
And so as of right now, the $12 million that was set aside for rental and utility assistance, that has not been spent because we're waiting to select a provider. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we still have approximately $1.5 million to $2 million available under the first round that we're still working through as well.
Okay, again, congratulations on your new role. I wish you nothing but success. If I can assist you, just send me an email, give me a phone call.
Absolutely. I look forward to meeting with each and every one of you all over a period of time. And surely give me a call or send me an email at any time. I'd be happy to discuss any of these matters.
Okay, Jared, we're back to you.
Thank you, Chairman Boyd. I will turn the floor over to Noel to go through the next category of expenditures.
Thanks, Jared. We're going to walk through the development agencies now, starting with the Affordable Housing Commission. And first of all, I just want to express my gratitude to Director Griffin, because these, I think, have been among the contracts and RFPs that moved fastest in the city. Legal assistance, mediation, and community-driven food production were approved at the Affordable Housing Commission on November 2nd. And that includes contracts with the Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, EHOC, as well as with the Conflict Resolution Center and Urban League. And this was done, I should also note, after, even before the ARPA bill was passed, we also turned to the Affordable Housing Commission to issue some emergency assistance straight out of the Affordable Housing Commission's budget, not ARPA funds. And they quickly did roughly $1 million in contracts to the United Way to Urban League to St. Patrick's Center to Horizon Housing, EHOC Legal Services, and Doorways to really provide that emergency relief as our city was on the cusp of an eviction crisis and making sure that these individuals had the supports they needed. So those first three items have been approved by the Affordable Housing Commission and will hopefully be on this month's ENA as the contracts get drafted and moving forward in the contract execution process. As for tiny homes and community outreach, those RFPs have closed. Those proposals are being reviewed. And while the date is not yet set, we expect to receive approval on those items from the Affordable Housing Commission later this month. And these items are tiny homes is self-explanatory, but community outreach is street outreach for the unhoused and is an item that has been issued in coordination with the Department of Human Services. Public Benefits Navigators is the only RFP that has yet to be issued. And the reason why is that we want to wait until we've identified a provider for the ERAP rental assistance support, because we don't want to duplicate services. We want to make sure that the public benefits navigators that are being paid out of these funds are providing additional supplementary support. And so the vision here is these are housing navigators that will connect applicants and residents in need across the city with rental assistance primarily, but also with other forms of housing assistance, such as home ownership funds or food assistance or what have you. So that's the public benefits navigators piece.
Just to be clear, no, public benefit navigators. So what would they be doing exactly? Are they canvassing the neighborhoods, or they're set up in an office somewhere as intake workers? This is a new term for me.
Think of them as intake workers and individuals who are holding the hands of applicants as they go through the application process. Because that's something that we see as a barrier for all of these programs that we establish for direct relief across this bill. We see that the barrier is access. It is making sure that those, especially those without access to the internet or seniors, have access to these funds. And so these are individuals whose role is to help them navigate this process and access the resources that are intended for them.
And so how do the public get access to these navigators? How will they even know they need one?
They will likely, and this is again why we're waiting until the process and structure for our rental assistance program is finalized, but I expect that they will be plugged into the United Way's centralized intake and be another set of resources that the United Way can plug applicants into when they call 211. But this is not final at this point, and the program is still in development.
Okay. I was trying to save questions to last because I'm trying not to go to 4 o'clock on this hearing because I know there's a lot of more information to get to.
We've got a lot left, but always happy to answer your questions. I'm going to talk through CDA next, and I'll start with food assistance. That's another RFP that has closed, and the award letters actually went out today to 7 organizations who have been awarded food assistance dollars. Additionally, the CDA is in the process of negotiating 3 intergovernmental agreements, one with 5 states, one with the St. Louis Public Libraries, and one with the Mental Health Board for the purposes set out on the presentation. The discussion with 5 states has been productive. We expect to launch the Gateway Go program, which will provide young people between the ages of 14 and I believe it's 24, free access to public transit in the city of St. Louis. That program will launch in January and include 3,000 cards that will be distributed to young people. And we're also partnering with the St. Louis Public Schools to make sure those cards get to the students that need them most. On the digital literacy education and community outreach front, the St. Louis Public Libraries recently received a federal award that will provide them access to a substantial amount of hotspots and other digital devices. The real challenge that they have is the kind of logistics of getting them out to the people that need it. And that's why these funds were in discussions with the St. Louis Public Library around them using these funds to hire individuals to help conduct intake and outreach to the community. And then with respect to the Mental Health Board and Early Childhood Education, the Mental Health Board has submitted a proposal to us that really allocates these funds towards two primary purposes. One is stabilizing existing businesses, providing them grants to plug payroll expenses and operational expenses. And the other side is expanding the supply of early childhood education, which we know is a massive constraint, and so many families struggle to find it. And so these will be used for facility improvement grants. And one of the things I really appreciate about the Mental Health Board, and it's been a pleasure to work with them on this, is their community-driven review process, where in order to grade these applications, because there are limited funds, they turn to members of the community. Finally, with respect to healthy home repair, which our office gets calls about almost every day and is a priority, and I've really come to appreciate its addition to the Board Bill 2. Let me start by just providing an overview of what the program looks like in general, which is a three-pronged stool, essentially, with CDA conducting intake and processing the loans and financial documents. Then the building division goes out to each home to determine and analyze the work that needs to be done in order to bring it up to code. And then finally, Mission St. Louis is our nonprofit partner that project manages the actual construction work, bids out the work for each home, and brings it to completion. The program is very popular. We had over 1,000 people on the wait list. We have begun moving people off the wait list. We're now down to 935 people on the wait list as of a week or two ago. But we also understand that it moves too slowly, and we do about 250 home repairs a year, which has been as a result of limited funding. But with these funds, our big challenge is really to expand contractor capacity. And that's why just on Monday, the CDA issued a Healthy Home Repair RFP. And the intent is we're going to be making a few changes to the program or improvements to the program to strengthen and expand it. One is just making the application available online and connecting the application process or those applicants to public benefits navigators. Another is that with ARPA funds, we've concluded that there's no need, as with HUD funds or home funds or CDBG funds, ARPA funds don't require environmental review or as rigorous an environmental review or as rigorous a Section 106 historic review. So that's going to shave a month or two or perhaps more off the process. Another big reform and something that's reflected in the RFP is that instead of bidding out each home individually, we're going to be doing master contracts. So we're going to ask our nonprofit partner and project manager to, instead of bid out every home, they're going to say, we're looking for a contractor that can handle, or a bench, a number of contractors that can handle every collapsed roof, every collapsed sewer lateral, every plumbing issue, every electrical issue. And so we'll have a bench of these contractors that we can turn to without going through a lengthy bidding process. Another improvement is that we are exploring using these funds for property tax relief, insurance support, and mortgage payments. And the reason why is because in order to be eligible, homeowners need to be current on their property taxes, mortgage payments, and insurance. And we believe that we can use these funds to help bring these resources, which are intended for folks under 80% AMI, bring these resources to those that need the help most, that can't afford to cover their mortgage or their insurance. And then a last point is that we also want to make the Healthy Home Repair Program a component of a contractor pipeline to build contractor capacity. A pipeline that can start with LRA property and maintenance of LRA property, and then graduate contractors as they expand their capabilities to minor home repair, to major home repair, to major rehab projects, and ultimately to new construction. So that's the Community Development Administration. Moving on to the St. Louis Development Corporation. The first thing I need to note at the top here is that our board bill awarded, Board Bill 2, Ordinance 71393, awarded funds directly to the St. Louis Development Corporation. And what we've come to realize, we actually realized it shortly after the bill passed, is that in order to be in the proper form, we really should have awarded the funds, and this is the historical practice in the city, to the Community Development Administration. Because SLDC, while it serves a variety of public roles and certainly feels like a public entity, especially at the Board of Aldermen and with all of its state statutory boards, is formally and nominally a nonprofit entity, a 501c3 and C4. And so the city of St. Louis can't award the funds directly to a nonprofit private entity. We need to go through a process in order to comply with 2 CFR 200. And that's why the City Councilor's Office flagged, and we are transferring the funds through the Community Development Administration. So all of these funds, before they get spent, need to have an executed subrecipient agreement between the Director of CDA and SLDC. So that's a little bit of context. Speaking now specifically to each line item, I'll start with
Noel, let me go back to that context so I can make sure that I'm clear. So basically, these 5 buckets right here that have been by ordinance funds placed with SLDC, you're saying that it really should have been placed with CDA, right?
That's right. And the advice,
and so,
go ahead.
But will CDA just, award that to SLDC as they have done with the what's that, facade program?
Yes, and that's exactly what we are working on. The subrecipient agreements will provide for the transfer of funds from CDA to SLDC, but also include all the reporting and compliance requirements that we require in all agreements between the city and private entities.
Okay, because I just want to make sure that I'm clear that the $20,000 for the Housing Development Fund, I look for it to be administered by SLDC for a reason, as a one-stop shop and not necessarily through CDA. Not that I'm disparaging of CDA in any way whatsoever, but I know they have a lot on their plate as well. And I just think that when you can culminate economic development dollars with housing dollars, then in one place, it's just a lot easier for a developer to be able to deal with that particular one agency.
Absolutely, and I look forward to sharing an update with respect to the Housing Development Fund in just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
First, though, I just want to talk. Basically, there are 2 big subrecipient agreements that we're working on between CDA and SLDC. One concerns small business assistance and incorporates the Small Business Grant Fund, the Revolving Loan Fund, and the Technical Assistance Hub, and the other concerns the Housing Development Fund. So on the small business front first, SLDC is looking to administer these funds internally, the grant funds and the revolving loan funds, through the local development corporation. And so it's going to build this capacity and muscle internally. Another important piece of context on this front is that initially we expected the federal government to really own this space of small business assistance. However, we recognize and have come to realize that although the Small Business Administration has over $50 billion in funding in programs including a Paycheck Protection Program and an Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, as well as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, they're backed up, currently around 3 to 6 months. And so although we initially thought we had the time to conduct an RFP for an external partner to administer these funds for us, SLDC is now looking to move more quickly and flexibly and build this capacity internally. A distinction that I'll also note between the grant fund and the nonprofit revolving loan fund is that the grant fund is intended to meet the urgent needs of businesses, whether that's payroll, operational expenses, winterization expenses, et cetera. The nonprofit revolving loan fund, on the other hand, is really intended to empower, in particular, MWBE businesses, small businesses that may be on the cusp of scaling but need access to patient capital. So that's the distinction between those two. On the technical assistance hub, the vision there is to establish economic empowerment centers across the city, and we're looking at multiple locations right now. And the funds will be used both to pay some operating expenses and a staff for those economic empowerment centers, but also to help either lease or potentially acquire or build out the property. On the Workforce Development Fund front, we actually incorporated that transfer of funds, because it was a smaller amount, into another agreement between CDA and SLDC, and those funds are working now in a partnership with the St. Louis Public Schools and St. Louis Community College in order to connect individuals to opportunities, residents and students to opportunities. And then finally, as your question suggested, Chairman Boyd, the Housing Development Fund. This is a really huge opportunity for the city, and again, I've come to really appreciate its inclusion in the package. We recently went through a process internally just last week, an interagency review process where we heard from 18 shovel-ready affordable housing projects that are all applying for 9% and 4% low-income housing tax credits. These are enormously exciting projects, and the shame is that we know that we will be lucky to get 4 or 5 or 6 grants or tax credit allocations here in the city. But we know that we need more. We know that we have 32,000 cost-burdened residents in the city of St. Louis. And by cost burden, I mean that they're paying over 30% of their income towards their rent. And in fact, we've also calculated that if you calculate exactly how cost burdened these individuals are, how much more than the 30% of their income they pay towards their rent, they overpay annually by over $100 million a year. So this is an enormous injustice in our city in terms of both housing costs, but also poverty, because we know that the solution partially is to produce and preserve affordable housing, but it's also to raise incomes. But that's why the Housing Development Fund is so important to us, because there is a housing crisis in this city. We need to build more affordable housing, and SLDC will be administering it. However, we are, as we work through and build out the subrecipient agreement, we are currently planning on building an interagency process to review these. Not because we want to take it out of SLDC's hands. At the end of the day, it's the SLDC staff and the SLDC board that will make the recommendation and approval, but because we think we're going to wind up with better projects when we do include the planning department, when we do include the CDA, and when we do include, of course, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so we're kind of looking to mirror the LIHTC review process in terms of bringing the various city development agencies to bear. And the other reason that this makes sense is because this Housing Development Fund isn't the only source of housing production funds in the city. We've also got the Affordable Housing Fund. We've also got CDA housing production, which will be moving forward another housing production NOFA in the new year. And so it's important that we align these funds, and we think an interagency process is the best way to do that. That's it for me on SLDC. Moving on now to the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment. The first 3, they're broken out in separate categories, but they're really all designed to build a year-round youth job program. And I'm pleased to share that earlier this month, the St. Louis Public Schools, we've been in almost weekly meetings, myself and Director McGlown and her team with SLPS and with their team and the college and career readiness program. The SLPS accepted roughly $800,000 in funds that we're transferring for the purposes of establishing a pilot youth jobs program in partnership with SLPS and with St. Louis Youth Jobs. And so this program, with the city's contribution, SLPS was able to double it from including 300 high school seniors to 600 high school seniors, and will essentially connect these students, first of all, to training and workforce readiness and financial literacy courses and social work support and everything that they need to be ready to go into the workforce. But then it'll allow seniors to have an internship and work during their last semester of school, and then transition over into an internship with St. Louis through St. Louis Youth Jobs in the summer, all with the goal of essentially creating an off-ramp for SLPS students as they graduate to go into the workforce and be ready to thrive in the workforce. So $800,000 roughly is being used for this pilot program, and then the remainder, we are in biweekly conversations with SLPS in planning for the FY 22-23 calendar school year. And so the goal then will be to set up a truly year-round youth jobs program with the remainder of the funds. We're really excited to move forward on that. With respect to adult education, literacy, and skills training, we have had engaged in conversations with the St. Louis Public Schools and the St. Louis Community College regarding their adult education and literacy programs, and expect to put out an RFP early next year. With respect to job training for software development, the Slate's WIOA board has already approved, excuse me, I want to make sure I get this right. Slate's WIOA board has already added LaunchCode, New Horizons, CyberUp, and SavvyCoder to its eligible trainer list, and is in the process of discussing MOUs to award funds with them, because the WIOA process already complies with the procedural requirements of 2 CFR 200. And then finally, with respect to child support arrears for individuals entering the workforce, we have had some preliminary conversations, both with private providers as well as the state. And again, this is an RFP that we anticipate moving in the new year. I'll pause there. I'll actually do the planning department as well, and then I'll pause for any questions on the development agencies. With respect to the Planning and Urban Design Agency, it's a single item, and that RFP will be issued, barring any unforeseen circumstances, on Friday as we hold a selection committee meeting. And this is really, I think it's been in the news, the work that the city is doing to prioritize robust neighborhood planning. And we see it as the first step towards community-driven development. The goal is that these neighborhood planning processes will help residents build a vision for their neighborhood, to come together and build capacity. Some of these neighborhoods don't have strong CECs or neighborhood associations, and ultimately identify priorities, whether it's identifying a site for development for whether that's commercial or mixed income housing, or identifying priority buildings for demolition or rehab. So this neighborhood planning process is really kind of the foundation of the rest of our vision for economic justice and investing in North St. Louis and across the city. I'll pause there to answer any questions regarding the development agencies before moving on to some other departments.
We're going to keep moving.
Great.
But that doesn't mean we're not going to come back at the end and ask questions, Noel. It's just, I wanted you to get through the presentation as much as possible while, people are still here. And I understand some people have to leave, but I think there's a consensus for a lot of the aldermen. They want to let this marinate, and they may have some questions at the end.
That sounds great. Thank you. First department I'll talk about is Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Board Bill 2 allocated roughly $1.5 million for the purposes of establishing youth programming for young people. This RFP closed just yesterday, and we are currently reviewing responses. It's also worth noting that not all these funds will be allocated through RFP. Some may be used internally to purchase supplies or to hire additional staff capacity, but that RFP closed yesterday. Next, the Information Technology Services Agency. The high-speed Wi-Fi and recreation centers, those funds have already been used or already committed to a contract with RJP Electric, which is in the process of lighting up our rec centers as we speak. There is a minor supply delay with respect to one item whose name is beyond my technical capacity, but we expect to have high-speed Wi-Fi across the city's recreation centers by the end of the year. On the data analytics and software, Jared will discuss these funds in a little more detail, but I'll just note that RFP is drafted, but we are waiting until our CTO comes on board in December to finalize it. This RFP is really intended to help plan an improved data architecture and create an integrated data repository for the city.
Wait a minute. Now you're waiting for who to come on board again?
Jared will discuss this.
Oh, he's gonna come back to that. Okay.
Yeah, because this is almost an administrative cost in that
Okay.
this is how we're going to be tracking data related to these programs. Moving on to the Board of Public Service. The first item is Equitable Microtransit Services. This RFP has closed and has in fact been awarded. These $250,000 will be used to run a pilot program in the near North Side and downtown that will provide free transit to individuals in that geography. There will be 2 electric vehicles, and the idea is really to connect seniors, but everyone, to food, to health, to economic opportunity. And we're really excited to see that start up in the new year. With respect to intentional encampments, a small amount of these funds were actually used, about $12,500 were used to construct temporary fencing at Interco Plaza some time ago. But the remainder of these funds we are holding until we have a response to the Department of Human Services RFP for an intentional encampment provider. These 2 line items work together with the DHS line item being for a provider to operate the encampment, and the BPS line item being for the city to construct or if necessary, improve the location to a standard where it's habitable. With respect to expanding broadband and public Wi-Fi, this is an item that while we have work to draft an RFP, we are really waiting for our Chief Technology Officer to come on board before moving forward with it. We don't want to tie their hands, and there are really some big questions to be asked in this space. The question is actually implicit in the line item. It says expanding broadband and public Wi-Fi, and those are a little different. Expanding broadband is about creating a fiber backbone that can make fiber more accessible, whereas public Wi-Fi is about lighting up our parks and public spaces. They're both important. $1,500,000 is not enough for both. In fact, $1,500,000 is really, we think, what we're looking for is a plan. This is really a planning line item, and we're waiting for our CTO to come on board in order to move forward with that and ultimately produce a recommendation for how we can most effectively tackle the digital divide. And then a final item within the Board of Public Service is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We moved these funds into the Board of Public Service because the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council actually did not have an account center that we could charge or transfer dollars to. So it needed a home, and the Board of Public Service seemed like the simplest solution. However, before spending these funds, we're looking to hire an executive director. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council does not currently have an executive director. And again, in the same way, along the same lines of the Chief Technology Officer, we think it's important to have a clear vision in place for how we're going to spend these funds and the role and services that the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council will provide before starting to spend this money without a real plan. So we're waiting on the executive director on that front. There's another line item is uniformed police officer overtime, which was allocated $5 million. As of last month, at least, I can report that SLMPD is tracking roughly on budget. We're actually, to be fair, over budget about $4 million on overtime, but we are also under budget, a little under $4 million on police salaries. So we're not anticipating needing to dip too much into these funds at this time. Right now, we're tracking a couple $100,000 just over budget. The Board of Elections, it has been working with our office and with the City Councilor's office to draft an RFP that is in full compliance with 2 CFR 200. And we expect that RFP, it's really not in our hands, but last I heard, they expect that RFP to go out by the end of the year, if not sooner. And excited to see that help modernize our electoral system and empower voters and make voting more accessible. And then I'll turn it over to Jared to discuss administration.
Thanks, Noel. So the Comptroller's Office is procuring auditing services. They are using those funds to pay for our current auditors, KPMG. So looking to utilize the existing relationship and contract to provide auditing services. With respect to accounting and monitoring of staff, that is something the Comptroller's Office, I believe, is going to use to hire internal staff and actually supplement SEMA capacity that does a lot of the back-end compliance work. And then legal services, they are going to, they have transferred those funds, I believe, to the City Councilor's Office because they handle legal services for the Comptroller's Office. The Mayor's Office, $65,000 was allocated for project management and transparency services. We've actually transferred those funds, or 60,000 of those funds, to SEMA, who has already done a lot of the reporting and compliance work for the city. Unfortunately, when Board Bill 1 was drafted, the city contemplated using CARES Act dollars to fund SEMA in their oversight of federal dollars. And after the budget process had started, we received word that CARES Act dollars would not be eligible for that oversight and compliance. So we had to transfer and plug that hole with this consulting services line item. With respect to translation services, I believe an RFP already was conducted, and we are in the process of entering into a contract with International Institute. And with respect to marketing, we have not, and communications, we have not expended any funds in that regard. So those are, I believe we've covered all the line items, and we'll open the floor for questions.
Awesome. Let's go around for questions. So we can go ahead and take the screen sharing down, if you will. It'll be easy for me to see who's all, with us. Thank you Alderwoman Davis, you're first up to ask 10,000 questions. That's all you get is 10,000.
Well, today, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass. I need no questions answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Pam Boyd, I think she's chatted. She had to leave early. Alderwoman